To the gap. Left center field. It touches down. Base hit. To the plate. Josh Naylor. Ball game. You can't forget about next year. The Mariners are going to the playoffs. Fly ball to right field. Number 60.
An American League West division title.
Ball game. The Mariners win. Seattle, you've waited long enough.
Well, it is playoff baseball, everyone, and the best part of it is that the Mariners didn't have to participate in it, and they won't have to until Saturday evening against the Detroit Tigers. Hello, everyone. This is Rooftop Sports, and here I am with, as usual, J Trident Podcast. And J Trident, how has your week been?
Pretty good. It's felt very weird with the Mariners having a bye because it almost feels like the season ended a little bit. You know what I mean? And now it's like, oh, we got to get back on the horse and get ready for baseball. It's something we've never experienced, right? Because even in 2022, we were in the wild card series, and 2001, there was no, wild card round. It was just right into the DS. So it's just very, very unique.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the only Mariner-worthy highlight for myself was I got me one of these guys at the Dick's Sporting Goods.
There we go.
I had to. Division champ, something that has been happening like at an average of like every, 20 years at this point. So
We'll
maybe
see two more.
yeah, maybe 20 years from now, I'll get another one by then. And by then, we better be like in the mega thousands. We better be making a living off of it by then.
And hopefully more than one division title between now and then too.
And a World Series by then. And I better have kids by then too. Well, anyway, so what we're going to do today, we're going to do a quick summary of the 2025 Mariners season. Then we'll go over the winner of the Cleveland and Detroit series, where Detroit snuck out of that playoff series, which I think many kind of expected anyway. And then we're going to go into the division series and preview. And then we will reflect on October 2nd, 1995, where the Mariners won their first ever division title against the California Angels, where we remember where Luis Sojo, everybody scores, and Randy Johnson striking out Tim Salmon. And Tim Salmon was in quite a bit of Mariners history. And also he was part of the last play in baseball history before 9/11 as well, where Charles Gibson made the catch. So yeah, Tim Salmon does have a lot of part of Mariners history that I guess not many people really know. But before we get into any of that, well, baseball season's here. And what does that mean? Well, ticket prices kind of stink, do they? You saw that on SeatGeek, didn't you? Where it was quite a bit, not exactly the cheapest, but hey, I got you covered. JS Trident has you covered. Use our promo codes RoofTopSports to get your $20 off, or JS Trident to get your $20 off. Why not save that $20 for a concession? Or better yet, go to Chinatown and go to my favorite restaurant, Jade's Gardens, and have some real authentic Chinese food. I meant to say International District. I'm supposed to say International District, but I don't know. Everyone calls it something of however they want to say it. But anyways, use that promo code Rooftop Sports and JS Trident to get your $20 off. And now we can get into real baseball. So the 2025 Mariners season, what a season it was. From what a quick summary that I can remember, it was, and I think we'll do each month or each time. So I'll start with the off season, where off season was completely, unfortunately, just a bunch of nothing. Like the only highlights of that was Jorge Polanco, aka the McDonald's cheeseburger that we talked about, and then getting Donovan Solano, which actually happened before Jorge Polanco. And just those were like really the only two like real moves the Mariners made. And then there was an article talking about the concerns of T-Mobile Park, whether the Mariners can actually hit, how are they going to fare at T-Mobile Park, as if we have already known that since 1999, but nonetheless, Mariners got that taken care of. Then we went to spring training where you and I, when we met, we saw Jorge Polanco play third base, and we were like, I don't know if how's this going to work. And then when we saw Ben Williamson, I was like, okay, you would think that he's maybe going to get a spot at that. So that was basically what spring training was, just thinking who's going to be a fit for third base. And Jorge Polanco makes the roster as a third baseman. Rather, it should have been just designated hitter or second base. So that's what I remember in the offseason in March. And what do you remember from the month of April?
I believe they were, it's funny now, it's like almost all blur a little bit. Isn't it funny how that happens when you get through the season and you win? But I remember they won like 9 straight series at one point. I'm pretty sure that was in April. A little bit of a slow start. The big moment, I'm pretty sure it was in April. One of the big early turning points for me in the season was that walk-off win where Randy literally walked off against the Houston Astros. Looked like they were going to lose 2 out of 3 there. I think they were like 4-8 or something. And it just kind of gave them a little deep breath win. And I think they swept Texas right after that, which they really beat up on Texas this year. And then, I'll be honest, I don't remember like I said, a lot of it's a blur, but that's like the one standout for me from April. But there might be another one that maybe you have. All kind of becomes a blur a little bit.
Maybe maybe that helps. But yeah, Randy Arozarena with that grand slam home run when the Mariners were just completely down. And that was, I remember the day before, I was devastated that the Mariners lost in extra innings. So I was like, well, we don't want to go into the third game needing a 2 out of 3. Because I think in that game of game 3 of that series, the other Luis Castillo was actually supposed to be the pitcher. No, it was actually the La Piedra Luis Castillo. No, it was actually the other Luis Castillo, the one that we forgot about. And we were thinking, man, they folded it. And then no, Randy Arozarena said no, grand slam home run, then the walk, and that led to a sweep on Texas. Cincinnati, they won 2 out of 3. Toronto, they won 2 out of 3. Boston, they won 2 out of 3. All those series were not supposed to be won. Those were supposed to be 1 of 3 each at best. But the Mariners they really just grinded it through. And then Jorge Polanco, he got off to that insane hot start. That's what we remember. Then Ben Williamson came on, and he showed what he could do at third base defensively. So he could be a piece of the future in case Eugenio Suarez is not back with the Mariners, which not a topic that we should really touch on anyway, because it's playoff baseball. And then Rowdy Tellez, he was hitting some random home runs, including that grand slam home run against Toronto. So that's what I remember from April. And that was a really roller coaster of a month. A lot of getting out of it at the skin of their teeth. Then May was when things would start to not go so hot. So after winning 2 of 3 against Texas and the A's, they got swept by the Blue Jays, lost 2 of 3 from the Yankees, and they were pretty much just limping throughout the month. Like Logan Gilbert was out because he got hurt against Miami when he was pitching a perfect game. And then Jorge Polanco slowed down. Then we saw Julio just completely just meh. But the only thing that was really consistent was it was really just Cal Raleigh. So that's what I remember in the month of May.
Yeah, that sweep in San Diego was a big one. I remember going into that series being very nervous. I remember you talking about it because you had, I think, Evans, Hancock, and then you had Wu going game 3. But I remember being like, oh, that's going to be a tough one. They just lost 2 out of 3 to New York. They were swept by Toronto, like you said. So I remember being very nervous about that series against San Diego. And then they swept it. They always seem to play well in San Diego. I don't know. Like, never seems to fail. That's always a place. I swear the Mariners seem to always win a series.
Maybe it's that Ryder Cup. Maybe that gave them the motivation because they don't know if they're going to win a World Series or a division. It's like, hey, why not just win the Ryder Cup, I guess.
And then June looks like, it's funny going back through this. It's kind of interesting to look at the schedule. They hit a little bit of that tough road. They were swept by Baltimore at the start of June. They went to the Angels and lost 2 out of 3. Then they got swept in Arizona, and they actually dipped below 500. And that's kind of when the turnaround started. That in mid-June, they swept Cleveland at home. I got that big road win in Chicago as well. So that really seemed like kind of the turnaround moment for the team.
Yeah, and I remember other key turnarounds that happened was when Dom Canzone, when he was called up, he was supposed to be just a meh, let's just see what happens. And then he hit that 2-run home run to tie. And ironically, that heroics of Canzone was halted because of a home run by Josh Naylor. I think it was a grand slam home run too. It was a grand slam home run. Pretty ironic that it happened looking back on it. So Texas, the month of June was a really rocky start, but they did seem to close it in the end pretty well. And then first half of July, they also played very well. 1 of 3 from Kansas City. And then they swept the Pirates. They struggled against the Yankees. So July, they were actually limping a little bit, but then they ended it on a strong note by beating the Detroit Tigers. And then we were by sweeping the Detroit Tigers. And how about Cal Raleigh when he hit 38 home runs in the first half, and he was just one behind Barry Bonds. Now, I think none of us was really going to believe that he was going to actually beat Barry Bonds' record. I don't think any of us would have really saw that coming. Like I think we saw like a little slight of a slowdown was going to happen, or he was just going to be 1 week he has it, the other week he doesn't. But the point was, he was joining pretty elite company when it came to like he already surpassed Ken Griffey Jr. He already passed Mark McGwire's 98 first half, Sammy Sosa, obviously. So an amazing first half by Cal Raleigh. And this was also the time that Julio Rodriguez was picking it up. And how about Julio? How about the fact that he was willing to take a step back for the All-Star game rather than just get into that fame and everything? He decides like, no, I just want to take a step back, because I think deep down everyone was shocked that he got picked for the All-Star game, including myself. And then Julio himself was probably shocked. So he's like, no, you know what? I think I'll just take this few days off, just clear my head, and let Randy have it. So you know what? What a team player Julio was, letting Randy Arozarena have that All-Star game experience. And then Cal Raleigh winning that home run derby. I mean, a lot of things happened in the first 3 months of Mariners baseball.
Yeah, then Julio really got dialed in after that. That Tiger sweep was amazing. And remember, I know you mentioned it, but that came off the back of that awful sweep against the Yankees, with Brian Wu having the no-hitter through 7 innings. Then he loses it, but it's like, hey, we're still up 5-0, still salvage a game. And then Brash and Munoz was tipping the pitches or whatever it was. And they lost that game. It was awful. I remember doing a video and going, great, now they got to go face Tarek Skubal in Detroit here on Friday. But credit to the team. That was a real big moment for them to kind of put that behind them, or whatever they did. I don't know how they did it, but whatever they did to bounce back and then win in Detroit. And it was so nice to go into the All-Star break with that momentum.
And how about Cal Raleigh getting that start as a catcher? And he is the first catcher in Mariners history to ever do so. The last All-Star catcher that the Mariners ever had was Dan Wilson in 1996. And how about that? Dan Wilson's now the manager. So we got a catcher managing a catcher. How about that? And then going into second half of July, they took 2 or 3 from Houston, but then they kind of hit a little bit of a snag against Houston and even Anaheim and the A's. And that's where, when they were having that little bit of a slumping end of July, that's where they knew that they had to make those trades, getting Josh Naylor, getting Eugenio Suarez. And I remember I was doing my live play-by-play against the A's, and you texted me going, Gino Suarez, good vibes only. He's here. And I was like, no way. Let me check the Twitter X, and it exploded like there was no other. And what a turning point that was for the team now. And how about that? They went on a huge winning streak. They started August really hot, and then they cooled off a bit in August. Like basically most of August, they really cooled off because of difficult road trips in Baltimore, New York, getting swept by the Phillies, and then at home they took 2 of 3 from the A's and San Diego. Then we go into September, and this was like the last time we were like, oh, could the Mariners actually miss the playoffs after what happened? They lost the series in Cleveland. Then they got swept by Tampa. And then when they lost to Atlanta, we were thinking, oh, no, not. Is this happening again? But then the Mariners responded with a 10-2 victory and an 18-2 victory against Atlanta at Atlanta. Then they sweep the Cardinals and the Angels with a couple walk-offs, and there was a lot of clutch moments. And then we were thinking that they were going to cool off in mid-September against Kansas City and Houston. Nope, complete opposite. And not only did they go 2 of 3 against Kansas City and did they sweep Houston, they absolutely humiliated Houston, especially in that last game. And a lot of crazy things happened, especially that Houston series. Or let's go back to all those other series like St. Louis and Anaheim. They had a couple walk-off efforts, or they had some moments where like, oh man, they're playing behind, so they got to play clutch, which they did, including a walk-off home run by Leo Rivas. And then we had another walk-off with the Harry Ford sacrifice fly. And then now let's go back to Houston, where it was 6-4. They were about to blow a 6-0 lead. And then how about Victor Robles with that huge diving catch? And that was the double play. And I was so shocked. I was like, wait, what just happened? Like, I think people on my play-by-play were like, Rooftop, are you okay? You just seem confused. Of course I was, because it was a high leverage situation. And I think we all agree that had that diving catch not happened, and Rick Riz said it was a season-saving catch, I think we would be watching. I think baseball playoffs would be a little bit different had Victor Robles not make that catch. Like I think people should realize how impactful that catch really was, and all it takes is sometimes is that one play to turn a whole season around or turn it for the worse.
Yeah, I mean, and remember too, they were, he doesn't make that catch, they probably blow a 6-0 lead because he would have had tying run at third. I mean, who knows that gets past him? What happens? Decent chance you lose that game. So now you're staring at blowing a big lead against a team that just will not give up the division. They probably, I mean, you never know, but I think there's a decent chance maybe they lose Sunday then too, because that momentum is just drained from you. And who knows? They may have been playing in Yankee Stadium this weekend or this wild card round, or they might have missed it altogether. You never know. I think they may have still gotten in because they probably would have still swept the Rockies and found a way. But I mean, it's just incredible, what could have happened there without that catch potentially. That is, I think, clearly the high point of the season, right? I mean, that whole series in general, but that catch just perfectly sums up what it was for the Mariners that month. And yeah, like you said, there in August too, it got a little dicey because that was when they were going through that stretch. If we can't win on the road, how are they going to win on the road in the postseason? And I think they still finished with a losing record on the road, if I'm not mistaken, by like a game or two, but definitely flipped the narrative a little bit there with winning 2 out of 3 in Kansas City and sweeping Houston. So at least I think giving the fans some hope that this team can go on the road in the playoffs if they have to and get the job done.
They were 39-42 on the road this season. And yeah, good thing that 2 of 3 in that sweep really did happen to make it look a little bit better on the road, and that 2 of 3 against Atlanta. And even in the first game in Colorado, there was some little bit of worries until Josh Naylor hit that bases clearing double, because there could have, if the Mariners don't win that game, then how would have the next 2? Because there would have been more pressure to win the series against Colorado. Then you'd be going up against the Dodgers. And even with a kind of B-level Dodgers team and effort, there is still no guarantees that the Mariners, even with their full squad, there's no guarantees that that they could have gotten 2 out of 3 from that, but didn't happen. What happened was Josh Naylor, he was the hero, and then Mariners pretty much played relaxed going against Colorado for the last 2 games to win the division and that bye week. And I guess the only nitpicking thing I have for the closing is I would have liked the 2 out of 3. Maybe that's just too much to ask, just to see how they can really play against Los Angeles. But I think at that point, like when I was watching the games, I can kind of tell the players are kind of like, eh. Like we saw Julio like let something drop when I think in a normal situation or high leverage situation, maybe he would have went out and died for that. Or Randy Arozarena just kind of just jog as usual, just let that drop. So so I can't really have a fair assessment on that Dodgers series because I mean the last 3 games were pretty much it was like as if it was a high schooler going through senioritis before college. That's what that pretty much those last 3 games were. And I think even the fans and myself were feeling we were like, we're ready for the playoffs. They got the bye week. But the only thing that mattered on Friday was maybe going for that number 1 seed so you can get home field advantage prospectively against the East Coast teams that the Mariners were. It's pretty much their death zone. Toronto, New York, Boston. It's pretty much death zone there. So, but then the Dodgers kind of put them away. So it was like, okay, never mind. So that's kind of why we saw a sweep against the Dodgers. But yeah.
And honestly, like the 1 seed, I was more worried about it had the Yankees won the East, and that's not to be disrespectful for the Blue Jays. But the only team we don't have it on is Toronto. And in my picks, I picked the Yankees to beat the Blue Jays. So technically the Mariners would have home field advantage there still. So they're in good shape. And I would have liked to see them win 1 against the Dodgers. I think it would have been nice to, you never want to finish the year on a 3-game losing streak. Like it did leave a little bit of like a bleh taste, but I've already forgotten about it. And like you said, I mean, it was, Miles Mastrobuoni's playing first base on Sunday. The Dodgers rolled out a BC lineup. So it wasn't anything that the teams were too concerned about. So, had the games really mattered, then, maybe, but I'm willing to kind of throw it away.
Yeah, we shall, but hopefully that's not exactly a reflection that how they would really play the Dodgers. But even at their full force, though, now this is just looking way too ahead. Mariners had their struggles against the Dodgers. Like weird things have happened, like Robinson Cano 2015 with his bad base running. I know that's way too far back, but how about last year when they got swept, and then the year before they also got swept, and this was when
9 in a row.
Yeah, and this was when like everything was like normal situation and high leverage situation even. And then, so I mean, I'm not saying hit the panic button all over a senioritis like theories and situation, but it kind of goes to show that, well, their B team did still beat up the A team Mariners-ish.
Yeah, I think that's where, like, I agree with you, where most fans would probably be like, it'd be nice we could have won 1, because the Dodgers are a team that you're potentially going to face in a World Series if you get there. I didn't realize until you were talking about that the Mariners lost 9 in a row against the Dodgers, which is kind of crazy. I will say for some positives for people from that series, game 1, Mariners had a chance late, bases loaded. I mean, they lost, and if you were in the World Series, you don't get half a win for being close. But, Gino strikes out, bases loaded, base hit, wins that game. Game 2, had they actually done the bullpen, like normal and gone Bizarro, Brash, Munoz, maybe they win that one, but Logan Evans is in there in the 8th. Munoz does kind of blow it in the 9th, but who knows? Maybe he was just throwing 1 pitch just to get a feel for it. So, I mean, it's close. Like there were 2 of those games that could have gone their way a little bit, but yeah, definitely like, losing 9 in a row to the Dodgers doesn't feel great, for sure.
And then the other chilling moment was when Clayton Kershaw was pulled by Freddie Freeman and we got to witness Clayton Kershaw's final start as a Los Angeles Dodger, because it looks like he was left off the roster for the playoffs, because I think it seemed like Clayton Kershaw was done. And given his not so impressive playoff record, I think they were like, yeah, you can just hit the showers. And I think even then he was probably like, yeah, I'm done. And I got my rings. Who cares? So, but yeah, congratulations to Clayton Kershaw for a very long, successful career. And it was nice to see him get that standing ovation. And how about Tom Hutler being able to, he was the last PA announcer to say his name. So he has a pretty special moment in his career. Yeah.
Who is the other guy he talked about? Who was the guy in the video? He talked about someone else that he got to do the last at bat or something of his career. Who was that he was talking about? I remember I was like, oh wow, that's incredible. That remember when who was it that he talked about?
I think he was talking about Nolan Ryan, that he was the last PA.
It was Nolan Ryan. You're right.
So yeah, he's got to witness a lot of greats of pitchers and got to be the last PA announcer for any of them. And he was also the PA announcer when the Denver Nuggets beat the Seattle Supersonics in Game 5 in '94. Oh, so he has a lot of unique history with them. One of them is a tragedy. The other one is a Seattle tragedy. And the other one is Well, and they all resulted. Well, two of them resulted in losses of Seattle, and the other one, well, resulted in a guy getting. Well, his arm just finally gave out. So, well, but anyways, we'll go into the winner of the Cleveland and Detroit series, which the Detroit Tigers, after losing their whole division, their number one seed, they lost pretty much everything. They rebounded anyway with great pitching by Tariq Skubal of the Detroit Tigers, the most feared starter in Major League Baseball, arguably. And I'm trying to see what his box score was because it was on Tuesday. They won 2-1. Tariq Skubal had 14 strikeouts against the Cleveland Guardians. Now, I know that we were going into it like, man, some of us were like, we kind of want Cleveland because we feel that they just got a little bit lucky. Mariners might match up against them better, but personally, I didn't really read too much into it because Mariners have had their troubles. It's not like they had troubles in the AL Central. It's just weird things happen in the AL Central. So now that, but I think you may have preferred, I don't know who you preferred, but who did you prefer? Was it Detroit or was it Cleveland that you wanted?
I think I changed like 20 times, to be honest, because Detroit and Cleveland are kind of, even though they do it differently, I think they're pretty even. So I probably have said 15 different times on my channel or with other people or with you, a different team. Detroit is more top heavy, meaning like you've got Skubal, you've got like Riley Green, Torkelson, some good hitters. There's more too, Carpenter, Gleyber Torres. Cleveland, I think, is more balanced where like, especially pitching wise, none of their starters are as good as Skubal, but they don't have that drop off from one starter to another that Detroit has. And then the bullpen's better for Cleveland. Cleveland's offense is just so bad, though. It was hard for me to see, like, had the Mariners played Cleveland, Cleveland was not going to blow them out in a game. Yeah, I mean, baseball happens. You never know, obviously. But that offense is just not good enough to get up on you. They don't hit a ton of home runs. So I felt pretty good that the Mariners would hold their offense in check. I think they can hold Detroit's offense in check. Listen, if you beat Skubal, I think Detroit's the better matchup for you because I think it sets you up so well the rest of the way. Whereas Cleveland's kind of the same team every game. Detroit is, not comparing them, they're much better than those Mariners teams from the mid to late 2000s, but it was a different team when you faced Felix, right? We've talked about that. Like, you know, when the Mariners would play the Yankees with Felix on the mound, you felt for a little bit like that team could compete because that's how good Felix was. With Skubal on the mound, Detroit is a World Series contender. Without him, you know, they're capable. So if you can find a way game 2, which is where Skubal will go, to win that one, along with hopefully winning game 1, I mean, you're set up fantastic. So I still don't know who I prefer. You could sell me on both of them, and people in my comments section have them like, oh, it's a great point. Someone says something else, like, oh, it's a great point too. Detroit has been a little bit more a thorn in the side. They've come into Seattle and played pretty well the last few years. Even this year, they did win 2 out of 3 early in the year in Seattle. I think it was second series of the year, even though the Mariners crushed them in Detroit. I think slightly I would have preferred Cleveland, but very slight. I will say, with that said, the Mariners, I believe, should have beat either one of them. No matter who it was, I would have favored the Mariners.
Yeah, I mean, if the Mariners have to depend on hoping that they play a more inferior matchup, then I guess there's something wrong with the Mariners. So it really shouldn't matter. That's why I didn't really put much stock into it but the Cleveland, I guess, weird things happen with Cleveland. Like 95, they lost to them in 6 games because they were just tired and burned out, and Oral Hershiser, Albert Bell, just too much for them. And then 2001, Cleveland, they got out of Cleveland at the skin of their teeth, and I mean literally. Like at one point, it looked like Cleveland was going to win after that 17-2 massacre. But I mean, those were years past, so everything is different. But history does say that weird things do happen. And for Detroit, the Mariners historically do not have a good record against Detroit. They are 215 and 234, and those were like even with years where the Detroit Tigers may have been inferior to the Mariners, but it seems that Detroit just somehow compete against them very well. And I think even like going back in like 2001, there were still games where Detroit was still giving them, quite a bit of some kind of trouble. Sometimes I'd have to look at those box score. I mean, you guys can look it up and put it in comments of what you think. But what I remember from that Detroit series, it was Hancock. He got absolutely just blown up in that first start of that season. And the Mariners just simply disappointed in that second game. And then they somehow beat Tariq Skubal. And that was off of, I think that was off of the La Piedra, Luis Castillo. And that's when we thought that they were just going to fold that game. But the Mariners, and this was off of, out of all players, Dylan Moore hits a home run off of Tariq Skubal. That's how weird it was. And I don't want to say that the 2 of 3 loss is really a fair way to assess how the Mariners may do in the playoffs. I mean, this was a different team. You had Jorge Polanco as your third baseman. You had no Josh Naylor, no Gino Suarez. Dylan Moore was very much part of the team. Julio's is usually a slow start guy. We weren't even sure if Cal Raleigh was going to hit 60 home runs at the time. So it was just so much different that it's not really like the best way to just because they lost 2 of 3, it means they're going to just completely just stink in the playoffs against the Tigers at home. And that's the thing the Mariners do have. Good thing they have the home field advantage, because so much of that talk about going, they can't hit, they're going to stink. But they still win their games at home. Sure, sometimes it was in years past, sometimes it wasn't pretty. It was like 2-1 victories, 3-2s, but they still won the game, and the pitching was what stopped them. But we do have concerns, and I know I'm going a little bit all over the place. And at this point, the segment between Cleveland and Detroit and Mariners division series preview is pretty much sandwiched together at this point. But I think I want to talk about the fact that Brian Wu, it looks like he might actually miss the entire series. And if that's true, that would be a huge blow, which means you're going to be left with Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, La Piedra, and then you're going to be forced with a decision of possibly just Bryce Miller might have to start. Who knows? Unless except in the playoffs, they usually just do 3 starters, maybe 4, but I think there's just going to be those 3 starters. But man, having Brian Wu would have been really nice for this series, especially if you're going to go up against the likes of Tariq Skubal.
Yeah, that's going to be a big blow. I mean, we'll find out Saturday morning. They'll release the playoff roster. I guess Dan said tomorrow they'll probably announce the game 1 starter. I would anticipate it being Logan Gilbert going game 1, Kirby or Castillo game 2 and 3. And like you said, probably Bryce game 4. It'll just depend. Well, I mean, maybe it doesn't get to a game 4. Maybe the Mariners sweep, maybe the Tigers sweep. Who knows? So, maybe there isn't even a game 4. We don't know. If there is, if the Mariners are up 2-1, you can be a little bit more like, okay, just see what Bryce can do. If you're down 2-1, you're going to I would probably say you got to start Bryce Miller and have the bullpen up, in the first inning, like ready to go in case it gets dicey. And hopefully Wu is back. It's hard to say. His body language is always tough when he's talking. He sounded kind of down when he was talking about it today. But, he said like, we'll see where I'm at next week. Who knows what that means? Maybe he means Monday, like next week. Maybe he means, that he's fine. He means next week when he pitches. So we'll find out Saturday if he's on the roster. May not mean everything, but we'll know for sure if he's not on it, that they don't view him as ready to go. If he's on it, doesn't necessarily mean he's pitching, just means they're confident enough to at least roster him for the ALDS. But definitely a big blow, like you said, right? Because you'd feel pretty good. Wu Gilbert probably going 1-2. And then you've got Kirby Castillo for the road. And then you can turn it back to Wu or Gilbert game 5, more than likely. So it definitely could be a big factor in this series. So, and then 2 on top of it, like even if he can go, how effective is he going to be? Missed. It's going to be close to 3 weeks, not a month quite, but it was like September 19th, I think his last start. It would be October, 8th or something, his next start. That's a while. And there was no chance to do like minor league rehab starts or anything like that either. So he's just throwing simulated games. How effective he's going to be. None of this is to be a downer. Mariners could sweep and it doesn't even matter. He might not even need Brian Wu in this series potentially. But it definitely is something that is going to be an issue potentially for the Mariners.
Hey, don't worry about feeling like you're a downer, because remember, this is a YouTube channel that promotes that's perfectly okay with being downers. I mean, I'm a downer of a Mariners fan. I mean, look at me. You've seen my very hot takes, and some people like it, some people don't, but this is this place where if you feel like you've got to say it, go for it. Like, remember in the comments where I'm like, and the live streaming is like, hey, if you like the manager Scott service I didn't like, go for it. Tell me everything you have to say. I ain't blocking, because I want to know what the other side is saying. And I love conversations of people that agree or disagree with me anyway. I mean, if everyone,
Yeah, that's what.
I mean, if we had a show together and all we did was like, oh yeah, I agree. Oh, I agree. It'd be a boring show.
Yeah, exactly. You got to have the banter in the back and forth. And truly, it's probably not even being a downer. I think everyone would agree. Like, not having Brian Wu potentially is a huge blow for this series. He's been our best starter this season, most consistent at least this season. So that is a possibility to be a huge impact for the Mariners. One thing the Mariners have, which is really nice, while they may not have anybody at like Scooble's level in terms of dominance, they don't really have like a major drop off, right? Like for the Tigers, yeah, they've got Scooble, but game one's probably going to be Cater Montero and then a bullpen game. Then you're going to have Casey Mize, who's been kind of off and on, and Jack Flaherty, who's been a little off and on. For the Mariners, it's like Gilbert, Kirby, Castillo, all pretty solid across the board. So I don't think there's really a way to do this wrong for the Mariners rotation-wise.
Which means why game one is going to be more critical than anyone would want to admit, because they have to get game one, or else you do not want to go down 0-1 against Tariq Skubal. You don't want to do that, because you don't want to go into the road going potentially 0-2 or even 1-1, where Mariners typically don't really play that well at Comerica Park. And and thank goodness for Google, I can actually look up how the Mariners do at Comerica Park. Like, and believe it or not, the Mariners were actually the first. They were the first team to ever play. Actually, might as well just ask this: Who was the first base hit made in that game between the Mariners and the Tigers?
Was it Olerud?
It was John Olerud, yeah. But yeah, I'm trying to look up the record against all those obscure games. I can't really see how they've played against Detroit, but before the sweep, this year. They were good this year.
Last year they were swept. That was a brutal series.
Yeah, not so much. Now let me see.
And then it's tough because some of these teams are like, the Mariners swept them there in 22, but the Tigers are awful. There was probably some years when the Tigers were on top in like 2010 and stuff like that. The Mariners were swept there because the Mariners were awful. And good thing is too, the Mariners have had success against Skubal this year. Not just, I remember when they were playing today they were playing Cleveland, but the series, everyone's talking, Cleveland's done really well against Skubal. They're 2-0 in their last two starts, but they weren't hitting them. They just happened to win those games. The Mariners did legitimately hit Skubal this year. Is over 5.5 ERA against them. 2 starts. Not saying Skubal isn't going to pitch well, but they have actually hit him this season. So there is some hope there. And the Mariners have been really good at driving up pitch counts. So if they can win game one, which I think is huge, I think that's a great call. I think game one is so pivotal in this series, especially with Skubal looming. If you win game one, then maybe you wear down Skubal. He goes 5, you're down 1-0. You can rally against the bullpen. Who knows?
Yeah, and I'm looking up the games, and I couldn't really find the record Mariners against the Comerica Park record, but the Mariners against Skubal, I can tell you this: they never gotten shut down. They never experienced a shutout against Skubal. They scored mostly 2 to 4 runs with a 1-run game, and they've hit home runs on 4 of those 5 games. So Tariq Skubal, he doesn't actually pitch completely the lights out. Now, before that, he was pitching probably like in the low 3 ERA, but now it's 3.77 because of the last 2 games. So, yeah, Mariners can maybe get to Skubal because maybe they just know his number, but at the same time, there's a huge difference between playoff Skubal and regular season Skubal. I mean, not only did Skubal carry the Tigers throughout the season, he also carried my fantasy baseball team into the championship game. So that's how special of a player Tariq Skubal really is. And now we've gone so much about the pitching, and thank goodness that they have pitchers like George Kirby, Logan Gilbert, and Luis Castillo. I mean, those three, as volatile as they have been all season, but it is nice that they were able to at least come back and be healthy when they were needed. At least when they weren't so healthy, that was when it was like early in the season. At least they were able to just get it over with, and they still played worst case scenario around 500 ball, even without those two players like Logan Gilbert, George Kirby, because George Kirby had problems in spring training with his health. I remember Logan Gilbert when I was at the Miami game, he got pulled after a perfect game, and all we heard from Tom Hutler was, "Your attention, please. Pitching for the Mariners is," I think it was like Casey Legumina or Casey Lawrence, and then me and my friend Greg, we just went, "Whoa, what just happened?" And like everyone was looking at each other like, "Wait, what's going on?" And it's like it's got to be an injury, and yeah, a lot of Mariners have been through a lot this season, and to see them win a division after going through all this adversity really shows that they were that resilient. And we didn't even talk about the offense. Like, what should we expect out of the offense? I mean, they probably may not do that well against Skubal. Who knows? But like, which key players do you see like that could be difference makers? I mean, I think my easy pick is going to be Josh Naylor. He seems to know how to do it in the clutch. I mean, everyone's going to say, "Oh yeah, Julio," but Julio wasn't that great in the playoffs either. So I'm going to say Josh Naylor is going to be the X factor of this Mariners offense in the division. How about yourself?
Yeah, so many possible answers with this lineup. I think Naylor's a good one. I do think Julio is a good one too. You hope in the playoffs stars can be stars when the lights shine brightest. I think Polanco is a big one. I think that bottom of the order, Polanco, Canzone, Robles, JP, I think is huge, because when those guys are really dialed in, it just flips that lineup over to the top where you get Randy, Cal, Julio dialed in as well. So I think that's really pivotal for this team. So I'll say Jorge Polanco is kind of my X factor here for the Mariners offensively. Also, Gino Suarez. I think he's kind of been forgotten a little bit by fans, like just because he wasn't great in the second half. I don't know what his overall numbers ended up being with the Mariners, but I think he could be huge as well.
Yeah, let me look up stuff. Like Josh Naylor's a 256 hitter in the playoffs usually, but I still expect big things from him. Randy Arozarena is a player that you might want to pay attention to. A 336 hitter, and he hit 10 home runs in the pandemic playoff run when he was with the Tampa Bay Rays. And he has been known to perform well in the playoffs. Eugenio Suarez, let me see how he does in the playoffs. He's a 300 batter. He bat 350 against in the playoffs in 22. And when I just remember about Julio, I also forgot that he was coming back from an injury too. So he had to take some time to recover because he was injured most of the second half. So it was quite an adjustment for him. So maybe this will be the opportunity for him to actually shine. So a lot of question marks going into it. Brian Woo's health. How will they fare against Skubal? How will they fare in the playoffs in general? How will the other starters step up? And also, can that Mariners bullpen just be a bit more consistent? I mean, there's just so much we can talk about, but man, the bullpen, as exciting as they are, led by Munoz and Brash. And how about Brash? A huge comeback of a season, also deserves a lot of credit. I think he should be a comeback of the year candidate just as much as Jorge Polanco, but it still has its volatility. I mean, we see Caleb Ferguson, he's kind of We're seeing Emerson Hancock, he's trying to adjust to being a bullpen pitcher, but his velocity went up, so I got to give him that. But it's something to look at. As good as the bullpen is, they're also very streaky, so we might have those games where in that huge high leverage situation, especially playoffs, how are they going to handle that, especially when they have been known to be volatile. Closing moments, like he's blown quite a bit of saves, and he's had games where it was like men are on first and second with like nobody out or one out. So how is he going to handle that? So It's a lot of question marks, but all I can say is I guess we find out Saturday how this really goes.
Yeah, that's the good news. I mean, all the talk will end, right? Not that we're doing anything wrong by talking about it, but we'll find out on Saturday. And I can't wait. I think crowd's going to be electric. Mariners haven't scored a playoff run at home in 24 years. So that's going to be a lot of fun hopefully they score at least one run in this series. I think they will. But yeah, all the conversation, and we'll get to it on Saturday and see what happens here. And then Sunday is just going to be an electric day for the city. I mean, you've got the huge Seahawks game against Tampa in the NFC with the Hawks playing well. You got the Mariners at 5. It's going to be absolutely incredible. Sunday or Saturday night into Sunday for Seattle sports.
And you got Sounders also playing on Sunday at the same time as the Mariners playoff because there was not really room to move them. Actually, wait, let me check the schedule. Oh, wait, they're playing on Saturday. Never mind. So, but they are going to be simultaneous. Seattle against Portland Timbers, which is a big rivalry game. So it's going to be a huge weekend for the Mariners. And for those that are using public transportation or trying to get to the game, be safe and Godspeed is all I can say. And before we get into a very special part of the show as we're getting close to its conclusion, how about the fact that the Mariners had their scrimmages? I'm glad that it happened. And most importantly, nobody got hurt. And it was cool to hear that Ichiro Suzuki
almost did.
What happened?
Troy Taylor did hit him. That was one thing I forgot that I heard. I guess he's fine, but I was about to go off and be like, dude, to get Troy Taylor, DFA him now just for that. But yeah, I guess he hit Dom on the tricep. I guess Dom was pretty mad about it. Rightfully so. I'd be like, come on, man. Like, how on earth could you miss a pitch like that in a scrimmage? But other than that, everything was fine. I think Dom's fine, completely fine. So
yeah, because Mariners need Dom because what a comeback season he had as well. He was a 300 hitter and he hit some of the most clutch home runs and a 3 home run game. Like, I don't think he gets enough credit for what he did for the Mariners throughout the season. And then, because I was actually one of the few that was actually really excited. And I remember Mojo was excited about him. They thought he was going to be some kind of a superstar in the making. Like, I thought he had the tools and potential. I liked his swing. And then 24 happened. Came back in 25 and at least hit 10 home runs and batted .302. So he actually was one of our more consistent players. I mean, but he still has a very ugly strikeout swing. It's still very ugly.
Has cut down a little bit, I think, on the K's at least. That's good news. It's been a little bit better for sure. But yeah, I mean, it's go time. It's here. One more day. No baseball tomorrow. It's tough. I was getting the wild card series helping me get through the withdrawals.
It's actually not true. I have 2 softball games in the evening on Friday, following with my tournament on Saturday. And if I am going to cover that Mariners game in game 1, my team has to be out as early as possible. But deep down, I'm still gunning for a championship. So, I mean, I watch the game. I don't. But now, the last part of the show, today is October 2nd, 2025. And it's the 30th anniversary since the Seattle Mariners beat the California Angels on a 1-game playoff to win their first ever American League West. And how about this as well? Not only was it their first ever American League West championship, it was the first time an AL West team ever won the division as well, because that was formed in 1994, which of course 1994 didn't have a division winner because of the strike. So the Mariners did make history that day, and that game was remembered with Randy Johnson with his dominant performance, only giving up 1 run when it was like an oopsie home run in the top of the 9th to somebody. And Luis Sojo with his everybody scores, with his bases clearing inside the park triple, they called it. They didn't even give him a home run for that because it was like errors of that play. And the ironic part was Mark Langston was the pitcher for the California Angels, where they were actually traded for each other. Johnson and Langston were traded for each other. And it's safe to say that the Mariners got the better end of that deal by beating someone that they traded to get Randy Johnson. And what was your memories of October 2nd, 95? I mean, I was just a baby. I was only 3, so of course I have no memories of it.
Yeah, it was the game that got me into baseball. I was in school, 3rd grade, and they announced over the PA because the game started at probably must start at like 2 something local time. I don't remember specifically. But I remember towards the end of school, we were kind of sitting around, I don't know, like finishing up the day, and the teacher was reading something. And over the PA, the Mariners, I think, went up 1-0 early in that game, if I'm not mistaken. And the PA announcer, the principal, whoever it was, said the Mariners take a 1-0 lead on the Angels. I remember being like, wow, they're announcing a sports score in school. Because I was more of a football kid. So football was on Sundays. We talked about football at school, but teachers didn't announce it over the PA system. So I went home like, well, I got to watch this when I get home, in my kid voice, obviously. Turned it on when I got home and remember the Soho double inside the Parker. And that's kind of what got me hooked on baseball. And it's kind of funny. I just assumed as a kid that the Mariners were amazing. I never knew the history. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know that was their first playoff appearance. I was 8. So I was like, oh man, this Mariners team must be fantastic. Why have I been watching the Seahawks and not this team my whole life? They're amazing.
You were watching a season of the Seahawks where Rick Meyer threw a career high 20 interceptions, and he eventually lost his job to John Freeze and eventually Warren Moon. I am so sorry you had to go through that, and I'm so lucky that I didn't.
95 Seahawks made a run. They were 2-6, got to 8-7. We got playoff tickets. They didn't get in. I remember my dad being like, wow, we actually sent us, because we had season tickets. They actually sent us playoff tickets in case they got in, because John Freeze was saving the day. But, at the time. So, and as a kid, you're kind of like, I didn't think of it like, oh man, the Seahawks aren't actually that good. It was just like, oh, we could be in the playoffs. I'm like, looking back, I know how we would have hosted a game at 9-7. It's the last seed. But, like we joke about now with the Mariners sending it out, the Seahawks were doing it in 95, sending out their tickets to it. So, but yeah, I remember 92 Seahawks was really the dreadful one. That's when we first got our season tickets. But yeah, I was like, we got to go to Mariners games. This team's the real deal. And obviously it didn't, like, when Cleveland knocked him out, I didn't feel it the same way other fans felt. It was like, oh, okay, well, that's season's over. But, as a kid, you're not thinking of that stuff, obviously.
Yeah, now we really know, like, the huge stuff about 1995, where not only was it the biggest run in Mariners history, but also there were some sad things that happened after 95. They traded away Tino Martinez, and maybe I shouldn't just go too much into that because we're talking about 2025 Mariners playoff baseball. But what got me into the Mariners, it was like officially like completely dialed in and into it. Like actually like looking at the box scores and everything when I was 8. I guess it was the Ken Griffey Jr. trade. That's what got my attention. And I don't know how that would, I would think that would chase people away. So I got into teams when it was like a very unique situation. And also, I guess it was my first time going to Safeco Field against the Yankees. That also just got me into it too. And then, side note, the Seahawks, what got my attention was, other than that Super Bowl run against Carolina and the Steelers, it was the Matt Hasselbeck getting cut. And I was like, oh, a rebuild season? They're tanking? Cool. I'm in. I want to see if they got like Andrew Luck, but then they got Russell Wilson. So, I mean, that's all I've really got to say. I mean, October 2nd, 95, arguably, the second biggest day in Mariners history, because that was all taken over by October 8th, 1995, with Edgar's double and Junior getting tackled by his teammates, including Alex Rodriguez. So I think that's it. Any final thoughts on the Mariners before they begin their quest for a deep playoff run? I hope.
Yeah, I would tell fans, don't be scared. I know Scooble's going to be tough when we face him. I'm as from an analyst standpoint, yeah, it's going to be tough. From a fan standpoint, good. Let's go. Let's play the best. This Mariners team should be able to beat anybody out there. They are more than capable of it. This team can absolutely make a World Series run. Again, I don't have a crystal ball to tell you if they will or not. Baseball is always tough in a short series. I mean, the Rockies have one series this year, so you never know what's going to happen. But this Mariners team can absolutely get it done. They can absolutely beat up on Detroit. They can absolutely win the ALCS and a World Series. And hopefully that journey starts on Saturday.
I think we can agree that talent-wise, this has actually been one of the more balanced teams in Mariners baseball. They have an offense that showed that they can hit the ball and score in some runs, although they were a live and die by home runs, which I do warn them. Mariners have got to find a way to play small ball because they cannot just go live and die by home runs, because let's remember the 1997 Mariners MLB record in home runs at the time, only to get completely shut down by Baltimore, and their only runs were also still mostly just home runs. So they got to find a way to play some of that small ball. So hopefully Lou Piniella is like telling Dan Wilson how to strategize. And yeah, a great bullpen. I mean, it couldn't have been worse than a 97 bullpen. And the starting rotation, good thing that the Mariners were able to find a way to get all that depth as possible, especially if Brian Wu was to be hurt. But that is going to be it. Thank you very much for following. Hit the subscribe button, like everything, you know it, for me and J Trident Podcast. And we will see you all on Saturday. And on Sunday, I will be there for sure for a live play-by-play for Game 2 of the Mariners and the Tigers Division Series. Go Mariners. Since 2022, I have been building the Rooftop Sports YouTube channel, and I want to thank all of you for your support and engagement. Without all of you, there is no Rooftop Sports. Now, if you would like to take your support to the next level, join my exclusive YouTube membership program for just $5 a month. Get first access to new videos, ad-free content, and exclusive insights from my fantasy sports, as I do play many fantasy sports leagues. Plus, follow along with my softball seasons like never before. You also get access to my own emojis to use to comment on my videos and my live streaming shows. For just $5 per month, become a bigger part of my community and get ready for unparalleled sports experience. Let's do this.